Valorisation platform connects players in Europe with ambition.
Hello there! Do you also find that the research results are slow to reach the market? Should benefit citizens better? Should we turn into more solutions to tackle climate change and other challenges? The EU Knowledge Valorisation platform is there to change that. Have a look and exchange with like-minded people across Europe to make it happen. Share your best example of a valorization practice and get visibility. Be inspired by what others are doing. Join a community to tackle specific issues. Find advice and guidelines. Take part in workshops and events like the EU Knowledge Valorisation Week. Keep up with latest developments and background studies. There is much for you to discover on the EU Knowledge Valorisation platform. Join us!
Good morning, bonjour, huomenta, good morning. Welcome to the webinar No Place Like Home, Community Engagement for Sustainable Solutions of the EU Knowledge Valorisation Week 2023. My name is Pia Erkinheimo and I'm the moderator of this session. I come from the Finnish Climate Fund as a member of the executive team, and besides that I've been working as an angel investor and board member at the Lappeenranta University of Technology in Finland. Before starting this session, let me remind you that you can join our discussion by asking questions through Slido, and you can find the link on the web streaming page. All information on the best practices presented today are available in repository of the EU Knowledge Valorisation platform. You can find more excellent examples there and share your own practices there too. So let me first introduce our distinguished panelists. Associate Professor Daniel van den Boes from Amsterdam University of Applied Sciences is online, and he will be telling about multi-stakeholder cooperation to address sustainability issues. And here on the studio, I have a business partner, Antonis Papanikolaou from the Q Technologies, sharing his views on voluntary integration of residences in energy. Thank you both for joining. So what we are here talking about is that Finding planetary solutions for sustainable living, we do not only need science and deep tech for making it, but we need engineers, philosophers, social scientists, true cost-reasonability competencies in order us to get the consumers, citizens, B2B decision makers to change our perceptions and behaviors. So we need to nudge our thinking and our lives towards climate and resource-wise living, but it's a transition. Addressing climate change and sustainability requires both broad-based strategies involving multiple stakeholders. It's crucial that science-based solutions are implemented in a way that it also engages communities and citizens, that the knowledge will be absorbed more quickly. Here are two gentlemen sharing their best practices. So the floor is yours. And let's hear first, Daniel, your example. But first about yourself. Daniel, how have you changed your own behavior and lifestyle towards more sustainable living?
Hi, Pia. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me this morning. Well, for me personally, I just moved here in Amsterdam, and we outfitted our home with a lot of energy-saving appliances, lighting. So, of course, energy consumption is a big deal in cities. So that's what we did. And of course, being from the Netherlands, we really love cycling over here. So I did already do that, and I will continue to do that for many years to come. So those are two things in my personal life.
Thank you for a good answer. And now the floor is yours. Please share what's happening in Resilio program of yours.
Okay, great. So again, thank you very much for having me this morning. I'm going to discuss one of the EU-funded projects which we did in Amsterdam over the last few years. It's titled Resilio, and my angle for this presentation will be a multi-stakeholder perspective on sustainable urban innovation. To introduce myself, my name is Daniel. I'm an associate professor here at the University of Applied Sciences in Amsterdam, and I've been the research leader for the work package which contained all the research in Resilio. And as part of that, of course, I have quite a broad scope on everything that's being done around this solution. If we go to the next slide. The program for today, I want to address four things. First, the issue and the solution. We're going to talk about blue-green roofs for climate change adaptation and urban resilience in cities, of course. Second, I want to talk a bit about the multi-stakeholder collaboration, why it is important to have these major urban challenges to address from a multi-stakeholder angle. Then I want to talk about a key challenge, which I guess is very common in other European projects as well, which is the trajectory towards more large-scale system transformation, because of course, see that a lot of these innovations as individual solutions are being tested, but of course the transition in the broader systems are very vital as well. And last, I want to talk about the lessons learned and takeaway for other European cities when trying to apply such a solution. So if we go to the next slide. We see that Resilio is funded by the Urban Innovative Action Fund. Resilio stands for Resilience Network of Smart, Innovative, Climate Adaptive Rooftops, which is quite a big title, of course. And the focus of the project and then the blue-green roofs as we implemented them is really on climate change adaptation in cities. Of course, we all know that urbanization is a major trend inside Europe, of course, also outside of Europe. And of course, we need a lot of mitigating technologies and investments towards combating climate change, but at the same time, it's also very relevant and important to have an adaptation in cities towards being more resilient and coping with the impacts of climate change. So what we did in this specific project is that we focused on the urban built environment and the transformation of the urban roofscapes. So let's say the city as a whole as kind of the context, where the solution which we introduced here are multifunctional blue-green roofs. If we go to the next slide, I can share some kind of basic idea for the project to get a grasp of what it's about. We installed about 10,000 square meters of smart blue-green rooftop, which of course is quite a lot. We did in Amsterdam, we added a major water buffer to the existing capacity in the city. We did it with 9 partners, about 6 million in funding, partly from the European Union, partly from the partners in the project. And we also actively tried to engage residents and citizens to really get momentum going for these climate change adaptation measures here in Amsterdam. If we go to the next slide, we can see a little bit about the partnership and who was involved in the project. So on the left side, you can see one of the roofs which we installed in the existing built environment. So we really focused on quite a difficult challenge, of course, being the existing built environment. Of course, you can also do blue-green roofs on new buildings, which I will talk about a little bit later. But we really focused on the existing built environment, the inner city, also social housing buildings from a couple of housing corporations. And you see that the municipality was involved, but also the water board in Amsterdam, a couple of universities. So really a multi-stakeholder quadruple helix collaboration to really implement this solution in Amsterdam. Of course, if you go to the next slide, it's also important to know a bit about the technology and why it's important. I already talked about climate change adaptation as being a really important topic for creating urban resilience. And of course, that goes for a lot of topics, for energy savings, to mobility, to any other kind of topic that's involved there. But blue-green roofs really focus on the roofscapes and really on water management in the city. So of course, managing flood water management, but also doing water retention and in the existing built environment. There are major issues related to, for example, urban heat island effect. So one of the things that this solution can do is really cool urban areas. So it has a cooling effect both on the building level and when introduced at scale, also on a larger scale. And of course, it's also about biodiversity increase. We know green roofs as kind of a solution which has been established over the years, but blue-green roofs really add a new dimension to the level of biodiversity and the different kinds of biodiversity that you can create on the rooftop. On the right-hand side, if we look at how does it work, so I'd already talked about some of the individual rooftops that were being introduced. So you see kind of a city, and it's good to visualize it as kind of a interconnected, digitally connected network of rooftops. So you have individual rooftops which have a green layer on top, which is the let's say the biodiversity layer, and then under that is a layer of blue, water layer, which enables, of course, the green on the rooftop to be more supplied with water, but also have a buffer on the building level to really deal with water and the outflow of water. So if we go to the next slide, this is really a solution that's also IoT integrated, so it's really a digital solution as well, because we really want to focus on building a system solution, not individual blue-green rooftop, but really an integrated system of blue-green roofs, which we did. So on the right-hand side, you see that we combine kind of macro level data about what kind of weather is coming in the next few days. What is the location? What is the flood stress in this specific region? What is the groundwater level? All kinds of really specific information about the macro environment, combined with, on the right-hand side, the micro level environment, so the type of rooftop, the type of storage capacity. And what we did is build a decision support system that really is kind of leading in terms of what kind of water layer needs to be there. For example, in dry periods, you want to have some extra water in the layer, but maybe when major rains or heavy storms are coming, you really want to have extra capacity so you can release the water. So it's really a IoT integrated appliance there. If we go to the next slide, what we did in terms of the focus, we really wanted to have a multi-stakeholder collaboration as a foundation for this solution. Of course, the first point, we know that the magnitude of urban sustainability challenges requires public and private collaboration on a major scale. In a city, of course, that's very much the case. And what we did was, second point, bundle knowledge, resources, specialized expertise of the different project partners, and really combine them into one integrative approach to really address this issue. Third, we wanted to build a city-level coalition for transformative change in the urban system, specifically related to water management here in Amsterdam. Of course, it's very important to have a coalition, and really, if you want to go towards system change and not only have a couple of blue-green roofs, but really integrate it into the overall water management system of the municipality and the water board. You really have to have them on board early on in the process. So those were founding members already of a coalition that already existed here in Amsterdam, and then kind of moved into Resilio as an EU project. We also wanted to drive momentum for sustainable action. So we did a lot of citizen engagement here as kind of a major stakeholder, of course, if you talk about the urban environment, and also create viable trajectories for wider dissemination beyond Resilio as a pilot project, for blue-green roofs as a solution for urban climate change adaptation. If we go to the next slide, we can see a bit about the angle which we took. I'm not going to expand too much about it, but this is from a scientific publication by Emerson. It talks about collaborative governance arrangements, how you can create them. And on the right-hand side, what we mainly did was look at why, from our actor perspective, what is the principal engagement? So why is it important for specific actors to invest in such a technology? What are the shared motivations? So from a consortium perspective, what are key elements that we wanted to build in terms of trust and legitimacy for this kind of solution? And very important, on a more practical note, on the bottom right, the capacity for joint action, of course. So having a coalition, having a perspective is really important, but also really put that into to practice and focus on institutional arrangement, leadership, resources, knowledge, everything that you need to have to kind of steer this solution towards more of a systemic integrated solution. So if we go to the next slide, there are a couple of things where this kind of materialized in the project. So for example, we did collaborative governance arrangements for what we call micro water management on the blue-green roof. So really on the micro scale of individual buildings, develop arrangements between the building owner and the other parties involved, but also on the level of the system, in terms of who owns, for example, the data, who owns the water, who decides whether or not the water should be released from the roof. Second, we did was, of course, a lot of impact measurements and modeling, really focusing on what kind of impact does the solution have, which is, of course, very important if you want to validate the solution as having a climate impact in the city. The third we did was a lot of things related to cost-benefit analysis. So we did societal cost-benefit analysis to really assess what kind of economic, but also environmental, social benefits does this solution have on the one hand side, but also on the other hand side, the kind of the cost, the total cost of ownership over the lifetime of the roof, which of course is very vital for principal investor in this solution. And we did a lot of collaborative approaches towards citizen engagement, really having kind of critical knowledge building for citizens. Why is this important? Why is this solution important? And of course, one of the things is this is a solution that's on the rooftop, which is not really visible from the street level. And also, if you live in a building, it's not necessarily visible. So we did a lot of things to kind of get the solution onto the ground level, really inform people about it, and also build a couple of innovation labs which were open to the public to really see this solution in action. If we go to the next slide. Then we see an example of how this was measured. So on the left-hand side, kind of the real impact on the building level. So for example, the heat, what does this solution for the heat in the building, and what are the cooling effects on the building level? We also model this for the city and the neighborhood level. And then the second example is, for example, a scenario analysis based on the cost-benefit analysis to see what kind of scenarios will come out if you, for example, change a couple of inputs or values. What is the kind of the net present value of the solution from the investor perspective? So if we go to the next slide, then we see that one of the major challenges, which I already kind of hinted towards in the beginning, is of course to really build a business case for this kind of solution, which is of course a relatively new technology, so kind of in its early stages of technological development. And one of the major challenges that we face in this specific solution, contrary to, for example, solar panels, which have kind of a monetary benefit in terms of energy savings, is that we see a lot of stakeholders that really see this as a key issue for urban adaptation. But at the one hand side, we have the rooftop owner who has a lot of the costs, of course, for this investment. But on the other hand side, the benefits like water management, urban heat island effects, other kinds of biodiversity, let's say, benefits, all are for society as a whole. So, of course, that's a very important question, how to address that. On the one hand side, the benefits are for us as a city as a whole. On the other hand side, the costs are for the building owner. So what we did, the bottom is that we also looked at what kind of financial assessment in terms of the cost-benefit analysis and total cost of ownership can we translate into what we call transfer mechanisms to really see what is the transfer opportunities for benefits and costs, which we identified three methods. The first being scenario development for co-investment for indirect or direct payments between the stakeholders who benefit from this solution, but are not necessarily the owner of the roof. The second is expanding the benefits for the roof, especially the ones that lead to monetary benefits for the building owner to really add value to the existing solution. And also third, reducing the investment cost or maintenance costs over the lifetime to really get the costs down and make kind of a more interesting net present value for the specific scenarios for investment. So if we go to the next slide, then we can see, we're not going to talk about everything here, but at the left-hand side, in the first category, you can think about co-investments, direct payments, but also subsidies, tax differentiation, volume-based reimbursements, for example, for the water that's being kept or being managed at the building level. But you could also think about different types of lease or rent constructions, especially if a roof is accessible for the public, or you can talk about commercial exploitation, even urban farming, those kinds of things. So really adding value to the roof. And of course, on the cost side, which is a bit more technical, but overall, the maintenance of the roof, trying to get those costs down to get a more attractive net present value in terms of the investor perspective. If we go to the next slide, then we can see my final input in terms of what are lessons for EU cities in terms of replication. Of course, we know that replication is really a challenge also because of a lot of local specific dimensions for each individual city, which kind of make it very difficult to say, well, you can implement what we did in Amsterdam, in Barcelona, or another city without any adaptations. But we saw really 5 things that are really important. The first, on the city level, on the local level, is to have an integrated multifunctional roofscape strategy. Of course, there's a lot of things around energy and mobility and other things. But for example, blue-green roofs can also be integrated with solar panels so that you get a blue, green, yellow roof, so to say, which is sometimes overlooked, the roofscapes and what you can do on rooftop environments. So that will be first to really have, from a city perspective, having a strategy to really address this. The second one is having economic instruments and financial resources available from different kinds of stakeholders, which can be funds on a national level, city level, all to kind of move towards a viable business case for this type of solution. Of course, we have a lot of other transfer mechanisms, which we discussed earlier, which we can also adopt here. But it's really important to really have the investment and financial resources ready to do this on a much larger scale, not to only have individual blue-green roofs, but also move towards a system of connected blue-green roofs. The third is really an important one, institutional framing, incentives, really get favorable regulation to kind of drive this type of solution. So if we talk about blue-green roofs, one is if you have a rainwater ordinance, for example, which stipulates that new buildings need to do X amount of water management and water retention on the building level, on the private ground where it is built. It already, of course, mandates that the developers and architects really start to inquire about what are the options. Now, one of the options could be blue-green roofs as a solution to really do water management on the local level, on the building level. Fourth is stakeholder engagement, participation, really building an ecosystem on the local level. And of course, the major topic of my talk today is about collaborative governance arrangements and really defining which kind of roles, which kinds of responsibilities do we need, because it's kind of a new paradigm, really, if you talk about urban roofscapes and doing water retention in the private area, but also having it integrated in the water management system of the city as a whole. So that really asks for new roles, new responsibilities that have to be crystallized for each of the investors and each of the participating stakeholders. So I think those are the 5 takeaways for other cities if you want to do this, to really to have that in place. Go to the next slide. I think this is a good moment to end my talk. I think also within the time frame, also included the link for the final report. So there's a lot of information about the solution, how we did it in Amsterdam, but also points us towards replicating this in other cities, which is in the link which was just on the screen. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel, very much. With the courtesy of time, I decided that let's hear now Antonis first and then have a joint discussion at the end of our session. But hey,
Perfect.
First of all, Antonis, how have you changed your own behavior and lifestyle towards more sustainable living?
That's a good question. So first of all, thank you very much for having me here. I would say you'll see in the presentation that I'll talk a lot about citizen engagement in energy. So in the past couple of years or so, I actually joined the local energy community. And through these activities, I'm trying to understand, how people perceive this whole energy transition idea, what are the local views, the local opinions, how they feel they want or they can change their lives toward achieving a goal like this.
Brilliant. And please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Pia. So good morning from my side as well. So as I just mentioned, I'm going to be talking about integration of residences in energy markets, and more specifically voluntary. So how can we actually help citizens, households, be an active part of this energy transition that's ongoing. So my name is Antonis Papanikolaou. I'm a business partner at Q Technologies. So the next slide, please. This is not necessary, I think, anymore after the introduction of Mr. Lemaitre. We're talking about the energy transition. So just a bit of foundation. So what's actually the problem, right? It's actually a technical challenge at the depth of it. So it's actually balancing supply and demand. So the energy transition is pushing toward an increased penetration of renewables in the energy mix. And we want to reach an extent of more than 9% or so. But by nature, renewable generation is volatile and intermittent, so it doesn't produce when we want it to, right? It has its own, if you like, pace or generation pattern. On the other hand, we have the demand, which is, citizens and almost all consumers, to be honest, are accustomed to consume whenever they want, right? They've never faced limitations on their consumption patterns. And now this means that supply and demand can no longer be equal. And the grid balance is under threat, right? The grid doesn't have inherent storage capabilities. So this is, if you like, the baseline problem. I'm a bit oversimplifying things, but this is the baseline problem. So can we go to the next slide, please? Now, there are two predominant solutions to this. And of course, it's not one or the other. It's actually a mix that's going to let's say, develop over time, but we can either go for grid scale storage, right? This can be electrochemical, it can be conversion to other vectors and so on. There are many solutions there. And this is typically CapEx heavy infrastructure, right? And eventually the cost of this is going to be passed to the energy consumers through network charges or other means. On the other hand, a second solution is actually what's called demand response, right? So actually the consumers of energy, of electricity, actually adapt their consumption patterns to the generation patterns. Now, this obviously requires a very active participation on behalf of consumers, because they have to be aware, they have to make this adaptation. And I hope it's evident that households are the hardest segment to engage in this, if you like, in this story, in this transition. So can you go to the next slide, please? So my best practice here I would like to present here is actually some work we've done on how to engage people into voluntarily participating in energy markets, right? And by people, I mean citizens, householders, ordinary families. So this is roughly a three-stage process. So we start with some early engagement activities, so they become informed, up to date with what the problem is, what's the transition, and so on. Then we go through a step of co-creation. We don't believe that there's one-size-fits-all solution. Typically, you need to adapt yourself as a solution provider, right, to what the people need there and the system overall. And then there's a third phase of continuous interaction, right? So there's an issue of if you get some effect in terms of demand response, you have to make sure you have the persistence of this effect so that it actually makes a difference in the system overall. So if we can go to the next slide, please. Who we are and how we did this. So here actually I represent Q Technologies, but this was actually work done by a team of three companies, three SMEs, two from Greece and one from Spain. So my Energia from Spain is actually an energy retailer in Murcia, and we collaborated a lot with them and their clientele for the specific case. And Q Technologies and the Hypertech Energy Labs are digital technology providers that provide the necessary, if you like, technical infrastructure to make this possible. So now solutions here can range from very simple to very complicated but in essence, we're always talking about demand response. I mean, demand response has many flavors, probably know, but in essence, you need some level of digital technology to facilitate that. So actually, this work has been performed over a sequence of projects, R&D projects co-funded by the European Union, and we would like to acknowledge that in this presentation. So can we please go ahead? So what were the main obstacles that we found and we needed to overcome? So obviously, this is not something that citizens want to do, right, inherently by themselves. And there is a reluctance to engage because they need to change their behavior. They need to adapt their energy consumption patterns. So the first question is, the first obstacle rather is lack of awareness, right? Why should I do this? Why should I help with the energy transition? Why should I be involved in this? The second is a lack of awareness or understanding of the possible solutions, right? How can I do this, right? If I'm willing to help, how can I help? The third obstacle is a lack of incentives, right? Because what's in it for me perspective is present in most people, right? And this can be either, a monetary incentive or sustainability or whatsoever, but people want to have some kind of reward. And the final one, and actually a very difficult one, is a lack of trust from the citizens, right? So this is something new for them. So they're asking, I mean, is this safe? Does it work? What are the risks potentially, right? So these are all obstacles, questions that we need to solve, that we need to discuss and resolve every time we try to approach new people and engage them in energy markets. So next slide, please. Why is this a European level concern? Well, I think it's fairly obvious that the energy transition is a pan-European objective, right? It concerns all of us. So to the extent that demand response will be part of the solution for the renewables integration, we need to be able to engage citizens, right, households actively in energy markets through demand response. And also, what we're trying to do here is actually present, if you like, a blueprint methodology for this engagement. So what we've seen is that it always requires adaptation, customization, context-specific techniques in order to address the local context, but we need a methodology that can be replicated to various contexts around Europe. So if we could move on, please. So how does it work? So essentially going a little bit deeper into this three-step approach that I mentioned a few slides ago. So first of all, obviously we need to raise the awareness of citizens about the energy transition. What is the energy transition? why does it help, how they can participate, what is demand response, and so on, how they can personally and collectively benefit from something like that. So that typically, you understand, requires a lot of field work, getting close to the people, making them understand through workshops, through trainings, and so on. The second step is actually making the citizens part of the solution. So what's typically called co-creation. And this is something that is extremely important both for citizens as well as solution providers, right? Because we need to understand the exact context that we're going to be dealing with so that we can customize whatever solution is offered to that context so it brings value. And the third one, and an equally important one, is how to keep up the momentum, right? So even if you achieve some effect, you need to keep this momentum. You need to have some persistent effect over time. And this is very difficult. I mean, after some time passes, and people might lose interest, right? So it's very important to monitor this persistence and the evolution. So if we can go to the next slide, please. Critical success factors. We saw it's very important, first of all, to have tailored and targeted value propositions to the people so they see the value. The second one is leveraging local social dynamics and networks of trust. Right? It's typical that people don't trust foreigners, even if they're just other Europeans. So we've seen that approaching them with local partners makes a big difference. Effective communication. For me, I'm an engineer by training, and it's very difficult to talk to people about this in a way they can understand. Right? We have to somehow meet in the middle. And finally, physical events are very good at boosting engagement. Talking over the internet doesn't work as well. So next, please. Lessons learned. I think I've gone over the first bullet, but I want to stress that co-creation is very, very hard, right? So engaging people, bridging that communication gap, speaking the same language, and to get a result. This is very difficult, but it's necessary. Otherwise, it's impossible to have solutions that are fit for purpose and are acceptable by people. And finally, it's if not critical, it's necessary to have short-term incentives, right? Of whatever nature. I mean, people need to see some benefit from what they're doing, at least until the long-term benefits kick in. So the next slide, please. So just some brief, if you like, KPIs or results. I won't go into main detail. So, I mean, this specific case was tested in 71 households in Spain, and we are already replicating in several hundreds across Europe. I mean, this figure is already outdated because we keep doing this work over several projects. You can see that we had an acceptance rate of about 80%. Now, of course, definitions are important here, what is what. But for example, we managed to achieve a peak shaving of about 12%. So this is actually peak power consumption shaving, which means that people actually did something with their energy consumption, right? And we had, for example, a good response when we asked for demand response of more than 80%. So if you can go to the next slide, please. Biggest challenge, I would say, communication barriers, right? Language terminology, semantics, and engagement persistence. I mean, these are the two major issues we are dealing with. So if you can go to the next slide here, there's a short video from our colleagues in Spain, in Murcia, that talk to people who actually tried out our solution. So if we can play this video, please.
El proyecto Utility, financiado por la Unión Europea dentro del programa Horizonte 2020, busca desarrollar una solución orientada al cliente que le ayude a modificar sus usos y costumbres energéticas y de esa manera conseguir ahorro. Se seleccionó el barrio de Joven Futura por ser una zona residencial de reciente construcción, la cual tiene un carácter dinámico como demuestran las numerosas actividades que se organizan para todos los vecinos.
Y yo creo que cualquier proyecto así que pueda ayudarme, por un lado, a ahorrar mi factura eléctrica y por otro lado, a contribuir un poco a ayudar al medio ambiente, pues siempre es positivo. Pues la aplicación me ha parecido bastante sencilla de utilizar, sobre todo he aprendido que conociendo información del consumo, al cambiar algo mis hábitos, como decía antes, pues por ejemplo el poner el enchufe inteligente en el termo, pues oye, he visto cómo he reducido mi consumo. Entonces,
¿Cómo han cambiado tus hábitos de consumo desde que usas la aplicación?
Pues desde que usamos la aplicación lo que venimos haciendo es intentar adaptarnos al horario, a los horarios que menos vale la energía, para intentar pues que el uso de la lavadora, los electrodomésticos, pues nos supongan un beneficio a la hora de la factura.
para cualquier familia, grande, pequeña, para cualquier empresa o industria, siempre va a estar interesado, o por lo menos en reducir lo que gasta en electricidad, o también en contribuir un poco en ayudar a reducir el impacto en el medio ambiente que tiene el consumo energético.
So, how can the EU help? Well, very briefly, I would say more information to citizens, right? I think this is the main gap that we need to bridge. So I don't need to go over all these details, but training citizens is very, very important on this topic.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Daniel, Antonis. And now let's go to questions. And I prepared several, but with the courtesy of our community, I appreciate tremendously the questions we can see here coming from Slido. And I think the first one was going to Daniel. Are the projects self-sustaining or will be in the near future? How do you ensure that the impacts of the projects are long-lasting?
Yeah, well, it's a great question, of course, and I guess that goes for any type of project which focuses on a pilot, and then of course you have the experimental period, and then it kind of the solution has to survive in the real world environment. So for the roof we installed in Amsterdam, there are contracts about how long, of course, that these need to be in place, how maintenance is going. So that's very much insured for the roofs in Amsterdam. Which are being already developed. But of course, related to the question, the main issue is the scalability and also investing more in that. So that's where we really need the collaboration and a really comprehensive strategy towards increased investment from these project partners, but of course also from other partners which kind of join the momentum that has been created over the last 10 years with this specific project. So I think that's, of course, there needs to be some things that need to be in place, like contractual arrangements. And at the same time, it's very important that kind of the momentum keeps going from these urban stakeholders to really invest more in this type of technology.
Okay, and the next one is going to Antonis. In terms of disseminating new technologies, is there been any advantage to do it as part of European project rather than in a national context? How would you evaluate this?
Well, in the scope of talking to people, right, trying to engage them, I believe that this European context, if you like, or this stamp of this is a European project, adds some credibility to this. Of course, there's no real impact on the engagement activities per se, but doing this as part of a larger umbrella does create a bit more trust. Of course, this is not enough, right, to get the job done. But it does help, and of course, we need to acknowledge that the funding also helps a lot because it makes these things happen, right? Otherwise, they might not have happened.
Yeah. And back to Daniel, just a very practical question and relevant indeed. How does the blue-green roof solution require certain building specification or quality standards? How does this look like from the standardization perspective?
Yes, well, thank you. That's of course a very relevant question, especially in terms of the implementation project, part of the project. So there are a lot of technical requirements that need to be met to have kind of an extra layer on top of the rooftop to be realized that. So what we see is that in terms of the technical specifications, there's, for example, needs to be a flat roof. It needs to be constructionally sound to kind of support the blue-green roof and the extra, let's say, weight that the roof potentially brings when it's filled with water. So that, of course, that was very well thought out in the project itself. And at the same time, if we look at the scaling part, it's very important to have kind of an overview in the city of what kind of buildings would be interesting for this type of solution. So that's one of the things we did, which kind of shows the potential for the city as a whole, which kind of areas these kind of buildings are, so which buildings concretely, but also, for example, where water stress points in the city are, for example, with heavy rains. And if you combine those, then you can have kind of a map which are very relevant in terms of where to concretely invest in these roofs. Of course, you can also see that in the new build environments, a lot of new buildings, office buildings as well, that go up really have increased outdoor space, also have socializing areas on, for example, rooftops or other type of, let's say, platforms where a lot of green, a lot of vegetation is. It's really a meeting area now. If we look, for example, here in Amsterdam, a lot of these new buildings really have those terraces, right, where you can have all types of commercial exploitation. And I think one of the things that really is important to really take the blue-green roof in those kind of situations into the building design. Of course, that's also from a business case perspective really relevant. Also from legislation, right? If it's mandatory by legislation that water retention is being done at the private property level for new buildings, for example, which will be the case here in Amsterdam, then this is a really viable solution, especially for new buildings. So it's really looking at the potential of, both in the existing built environment on flat roofs, which are constructionally sound enough to kind of support a blue-green roof, and at the same time looking at how can we increase this for new buildings, and where are the most relevant topics to do that, or places.
Thank you. Well, with the courtesy of time, I have one question for both of you. So I start here from Antonis now. So what was the biggest surprise or the strongest personal learning when working with this topic that you presented?
That's a very good question. I think it was, well, a learning. It was an understanding rather of the, if you like, the communication gap or the awareness gap that you need to fill in order to be able to replicate this practice, right? To do this practice properly with success and replicate it. So, as I mentioned before, I'm an engineer by training. I mean, these things come naturally to me, these kinds of topics of the energy transition and so on, but that's not the same, right, for the average citizen. And I found out that it's not a matter of, of discussion of a quarter of an hour to explain things to people and get them on board, even if the incentives are there. People need time to understand, right? They need all these concepts popularized, explained properly in their own, in the terms that they understand, right? They can relate to, and only then they can actually start coming closer to what we're trying to do. And I had not realized how big this gap is, to be honest.
Yeah. And the very last question to Daniel, yourself, in a very short moment of time, top of your mind, what surprised you most? What was your strongest learning? Learning is also emotion. So what comes to your head?
Yes, well, in terms of the solution, really the potential that there is on urban roofscapes, right? We always talk about like cities needs to be more sustainable. And I personally, my background is in business and energy transition, so I really focus on energy most of the time. And I was never aware of the importance of also including water management, but also on the rooftop. Of course, there's a lot of other areas to do that. So I think more of an integrated water strategy, where this is one of the elements within a water system in the city. That's kind of the solution was new to me, but also the potential of the solution was new to me. So that's what I really picked up in this specific project.
Well, thank you very much, Antonis, Daniel, and thank you for following the webinar No Place Like Home, Community Engagement for Sustainable Solutions of the EU Knowledge Valorisation Week. Join us again in 15 minutes for the next session, New Kids on the Block, how to make startups sustainable success, with more great practices to come. So thank you very much, and thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Pia.
Thank you.